These could be the most critical trades you make of the season. Probably a little hyperbolic, I know, but with us now out of best 18 for the next 2 months, we are about to learn about your AFL fantasy side as we head into round 5 and gather round for the 2025 AFL fantasy season. 2 critical things to talk about before we go through my top 10 trade targets. Number 1, don't forget, you are in best 22 this week. Those annoying 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s that you've been like, yeah, it falls out, doesn't matter. You won't protected by that anymore. If they are on field, they playing, they're counting. Number 2 is your ranking, while aided and helpful to understand because of best 18, has protected us a little bit and given an inflated or an unrealistic perspective of just where our team is. What's a greater perspective right now is your team value. To me, that is a much greater indicator of where your team probably is. You have to be well north of 20 million, absolutely, and knocking on the door of 21 to really be in that strong position that you want to be. So that's what I would be looking at more so than your rank, is looking at your team value. That's much more indicative of really the moves you can make as we get close to upgrade season, which some coaches might even feel like they're in right now. What's my number 1 trade target for the week? Any guesses, anyone? Riley Bice. Should not surprise you. Basically, 1 in 3 coaches own him at time of recording, but over the round, it was under 25% ownership. It was a knockout pick for those that jumped into him, whether it was you were worried about a Sam de Koning Ruck role share, so you pivoted away. It didn't feel great Friday night. Felt awesome on Saturday, didn't it? Regardless, under 400,000, such a great negative break even. And if you can maintain this average of around the mid-70s, which I think is a truer reflection of what he is, not the 120s, but we'll take him, is we're talking about a guy that could push that price nearing that 600,000 marker inside the next month if you can have a couple more 70s, 80s, let alone another 120. This score hangs in that cycle for a decent amount of time, and for us in the community, it's exactly what we need. Whether it be via de Koning, whether it be via Fraser, whether it be via something you use in your utility, you just need to get him. He's already made over 100,000 just last week alone. If he pops another 80 plus score, he's just away from you. This is the chance to get him before he balloons up towards 500,000 and then 600,000 as far as I'm concerned by the end of April, if not already. So this is critical trade territories for 75% of the competition. This is the move you need to make. For everybody else that's not, well, you've got luxuries of making multiple choices of my following 9 suggestions. If you're one of the 25% that didn't have him before round 4 was underway, this is the trade you do. Politely, how you get there matters, whether it's Fraser, whether it's de Koning, whether it's a Nevitt, whether it's using utility. Frankly, I'm not super fast, although I do care about how you get there. The fact is, if you miss him now, it might, again, staying in the realms of hyperbole, it's probably season over in terms of now the amount of cash generation you've got to get. I know that's a bit dramatic, and it probably is, but that's how critical I think he is to make sure you nail this week. If you didn't get him last week, I get why and how you prioritized elsewhere. That's fine. This week, you have to correct course and get onto him. My number 2 trade target, staying with the Swans, is a Caiden Cleary. 68 last week, a negative break even, under 300,000. The reason I think he's still really viable and critical for us is he scored well last week, despite it not going all his way. Importantly, well clear of any buys for the foreseeable future. Sydney's fixtures sort of have patches over the next 2 months, but there are some favourable games for small forwards. And what he's got going for him is there's no Tom Papley for at least 5 more weeks. It could be up to 2 months. And so he's got job security. He's proven pressure player, good goal sneak. He's more of a ball winning midfielder, but he's developing nicely in this small forward role. And with no Wicks going into that role, who's kind of spent more of his career in that spot, to me, that's really favourable, that not only Wicks is clearly preferred by Dean Cox in that back spot, but that Cleary's probably got this opportunity. So whether it be via Stone, whether it be a Wicks. I would have probably said Sanders up until his performance on the weekend. I think he deserves, now with that break even in the 50s, at least another week to make you another 10, 20, 30K, depending what he scores. I think Cleary is absolutely a player. I have no problem with you doubling up on Swans this week as trade targets. Others might look to diverge into more upgrades, get some guys that are cheap. That's a play too. But to me, these are the top 2 trade targets this week. Who's my number 3? Well, if you're looking to improve your back line, I don't think you can go too far wrong with Tom Stewart. He's number 3 trade target for me this week. What I like him, $805,000. The break even of 103 does have him as attainable for you at this point. So you can wait a week. And there's probably a couple reasons why you might consider waiting. The fact that it's against the Crows, who it's a small sample size, but they do look difficult to score against. The fact that his break even is well within his scope. We know while his average is in the 70s, historically he's a 90s to 100 guy, and that single digit score from a few weeks back is what's hurting him. And then the fact that goes alongside it is a Thursday night game. And so locking in one of your trades before you even see your Sunday squads can be a little daunting and risk-averse reason for coaches. But to me, like, it's what, 80K, give or take a little bit, via a Sam de Koning. It's about 130, 140, 150 via a Joel Frazier. Man, if you told me I could get into Tom Stewart for less than 150K off either of those guys at the start of the year, I would have said lock me in. Yeah, he's always that concussion, that injury risk. Hopefully that's the one postseason he gets, and you can get a nice stretch of 8 to 10 games out of him, switch off him at the bye. Happy days. Can you wait a week? Of course you can. If you're on limited funds and you're happy with the cash generation you've got to date, I have no problem with you, especially Frazier or SDK up. I think that's a nice move. My number 4 trade target this week, I've been bullish on him all year, Andrew Brayshaw. Our Patreons can tell you that at the end of the round 2 round review episode I said, by the end of round 6, I'm still confident that Andrew Brayshaw is going to go at an average of 110. It was because the fixture was really opening up for him. And we've seen that over the last 2 weeks with a matchup this week against Richmond, who, while not unbelievable for inside mids, we see Brayshaw do his most damage on the outside and in transition while still having a contested part of his game. You watch what Hugh McCluggage did last week? I think that might be the territories of what Andy Brayshaw could do for us. Again, like Stewart, not at a break-even space where it's now or never, but he has leaked a little bit of cash. But the fixtures over this month are really good. And with Richmond this week, I can see a 130 on the cards pretty comfortably this week for Andy Brayshaw. He might be one of, if not my number 1 captain choice this week. I'll know for sure as I get deeper into the week, but he's right in that conversation. To me, again, you want to upgrade a mid. Maybe you've got a little bit of utility positioning and DPP movements that you can make. He's right in the pocket. If I was going to any premium mid this week, Andy Brayshaw is my number 1 pick. And then to round out my top 5, maybe I'm doubling down here, but a Ryan Marich, 550K, still got a really attainable break even. And he didn't pop the score last week that I know many of us that either traded into him expected, or those that were going against him kind of hoped wouldn't go out for them. But he's got that role. I think that's the critical piece here, is you've got to identify the opponent that he played against and the role that he had. And that GWS team are really difficult matchup. Cadman, Stringer, Riccardi, that's a decent set of tools. And Greenwald on the smaller side plays like a tool. And there were portions in this game, especially in the second and last quarter, where it was just banging into the Giants' goals. And there was just nothing that the Eagles defenders could do to even get a chance to maintain the ball or maintain possession. And so what I loved about this is Marich still had the kick-ins, and he was the playmaker that when the Eagles did look good out of rebounding out of D50, it almost exclusively came off the foot of Ryan Marich. Some of the fixtures do open up a little bit over the next couple of weeks in terms of not having to play as tall, and that kind of small to tall defensive ratio for them getting a little bit more favourable based on opposition forwards. And so to me, I still think he's there. If I was trading into a forward that I wanted to still make some money and be comfortable to field, because I wouldn't want to field Cleary, right? Cleary's the best money maker forward. But if I wanted to kind of have my cake and eat it too, of who could dish me up some 80s and 100 and who could make me money, this is my halfway house. I've got a forward that I think could later on still be a great buy for you, but I'm picking Marich in at my 5 because I want that opportunity of doing what's really critical in AFL Fantasy, looking for value while still generating funds and not hurting me on the scoreboard. And I think Marich could do that. I still think there's at least another 100 and 150,000 built within him, and I'm very, very happy to advocate for him. So those are my 5. You got them? Bice, Cleary, Stewart, Brayshaw, Marich. How many of those 5 have you got currently in your team before trading right now? Which of those 5 are currently in your top 5 as trade targets? I'd love to know. You want to know my final 5 of the top 10? Let's go. Let's hit them off. Harry Sheezel sits at number 6 for me. He's almost a 110 guy still. But there's a couple of reasons why I want to put him in the mix here. Number 1 is it's a very easy outlet pathway here. We talked about a De Koning and a Fraser as being a great downgrade option via a Riley Bice. Well, what do you do with that 300-odd thousand that's sitting freed up from one of them? Well, you put it on top of the other, and with a little bit of money in the bank, you've got yourself a Harry Sheezel, who's going to be a top 3 defender alongside a Whitfield and a Zorko, as far as I'm concerned. But the extra allure to tapping into Sheezel this week was he had a different role this weekend gone. Historically, so far, we've seen in 2025 that he's played more as mid-forward, and they've wanted his ball use to bring the ball inside forward 50, setting up that score involvement opportunities, impacting and setting up the goals. Hasn't really worked for them, and so they moved him into the back half, back to where he was last year. Still a decent clip of midfield time, so it's not exclusive half-back role. But the fact that he was back there meant he got a lot more uncontested possessions, a lot more uncontested marks. He was involved in scoring chains a little bit more when they pushed the ball up, and was behind the pack and almost out of the attention of opposition teams as they put all their attention in and around a Luke Davies-Uniacke at stoppage. And so to me, that's the allure here, is both the combination of how easy it is to get in there with a Fraser and SDK, Bice in, up we go, but also the fact that now if he's distributing off halfback, even if he doesn't get the kick-ins, the fact that he's able to then get those uncontested marks from kick-in, easy +6s, starting to be now used when they transition the ball from flank to flank. This is where he was knocking that door of 115, 120 last year. So again, the break-even's attainable. You could wait a week if you wanted to test if that role holds with a Sullivan back. They were poor on the weekend. Do they change things up again? We'll wait and see. But I think we all know we want Sheezel in our team at some point. It's not buying low, but it's probably buying as low as he's going to go. And so for me, I'm happy to advocate to go and get it. Number 7, Caleb Serong. Got the same easy and favourable fixture that his teammate Andrew Brayshaw does. What's probably a little bit more palatable or interesting for potential owners is he's under that $1 million price point. I mean, he's got a fixture that pops, and we know that on his day he's got 120, 130, 150s on him. Now, I don't love his ceiling consistency as much as I do Brayshaw's historically, and he probably feels like the tag target now more. In a sense of when I look at the teams coming up, St Kilda's one of those. Do they choose to stop the ball movement at the source at clearance and at stoppage? Or do they try to stop the second touch impact? Well, St Kilda chose to do Rosie, so maybe that's what they're going to do. But to me, if you're ever going to stop down at the source scoring and at the source ball movement, Serong's the guy at Fremantle you go, right? Regardless, great fixture, historical pedigree, and coming off the back of a great score to start the year. And Richmond's favourable for him. It's not unbelievable, but it is favourable. And so to me, I'd happily advocate to go into that. My number 8 trade target, Jason Horne-Francis. Yeah, he's not been great until last week. Now, did it take Butters to arrive? Maybe. Did it take public humiliation at the media landscape to get him there? Maybe. Politely, not really too fussed. The fact is, he's priced at $851,000. He ain't getting much cheaper than that, coming in off a seasonal average in that mid-80s, a break even of under 80. This is the definition of buying low. The reason you're probably not going there is you really don't want to own shares in Jason Horne-Francis at all this year. And I actually think that's a viable strategic play. I actually have no problem with someone doing that. But if you wanted your hands on JHF, this might be the opportune time to get it. Because again, teams are now clearly wanting to stop Rosie's second touch around the ground impact. Butters back does make them structurally look better. And we saw the aggro that we know Horne-Francis can be. Mid-20s touches, handful of marks and tackles, and a couple of goals. That's what Horne-Francis should be at his absolute optimal peak. So to me, if you wanted to get onto the Huffin, if you wanted to get into the Hornet, this feels like to me at a buy low price. And it's now negating someone that half the comp have, that you knew had a risk factor to you, that he can run on a fixture of 5-6 weeks of going 110 plus and really hurt you. Now you've saved yourself 50, 60, 70, 80K and you're in the spot where everybody else is. So is it separating your team? No, but it's protecting your team. So I still don't mind it as a play. I think it's an absolute option. Then my last two trade targets for you this week in AFL Fantasy. Kieran Briggs. And so I think what's interesting here about Kieran as a play is I could only recommend it if you're a current Bice owner. Let me explain that. For non-Bice owners, this is your there's no excuse to not get Bice as far as I'm concerned this week, but that's one of your trade. The next one, what are you trying to do? Well, you're trying to ultimately increase your team value, and you're going to do that through cash generation. And so while you could say, well, I could jump down off Gorn, I could jump down off Cherry, and I can see that as a viable play, I'll just redeploy the 200K and go there. Well, at a break even of 99, I think you're only going to get about 50 grand worth of generation of cash out of Briggs, plus the money you've saved, I understand, to be able to really validate that. I'd much rather get off of a stone and build that 150K that way and not lose the sunk cost of the 150K that Gorn and Cherry have already dropped. And so everyone plays the game differently, and I wouldn't turn anyone off the idea of doing it this week. But for me and how I'd like to play the game, I would rather just absorb the sunk and lost cost, knowing that a player's value doesn't matter as long as I don't trade them out. I don't want to double down on the poor scores and cash they've lost. I'd rather do it through upgrading around it and managing that. Different in other formats, of course. But to me, if you're a Bice owner, it's at least a consideration. If you're not a Bice owner, surely there's a secondary trade that's more important than getting off of a Gorn and getting off of a Cherry. You should have other issues. You should have red dots. You should have nearly tapped out cash cows in your forward and midfield line. To me, that is a higher priority. At least you could consider it as a Bice owner. Again, everyone plays the game differently. Everyone gives different advice. And that's the beauty of fantasy footy, is you can play this game differently. But to me, I wouldn't advocate for that. But I think he's an option. I think you can look at it. I wish we had a flex position. That would really open things up interestingly. But he's a play for coaches that are, sick of Cherry, sick of Gorn, already have Bice. Maybe they've gone something a little bit different. Luke Jackson, maybe. He's an outlet. He's an option. He's a mid-90s guy that can sneak the tons, that's for sure. And then my last trade target for the week. Again, I'd rather go, if I'm spending $1 million, I'm going for Bray. If I need under $1 million, I'm going Serong. But if I need it under 900,000, Taranto. Tim Taranto is the guy I'd want shares in. Under 900K, got a break even that's about what he's going to be. He hasn't started great, but what looked good to me this week is that Richmond midfield seemed to function a little bit better this week. He did spend a little bit more time forward. And while the Richmond midfield is dysfunctional in its archetypes, it's going to take some time. And I think Tigers fans at their heart of hearts know this, that when I say it's a poorly functioning midfield, they're not like, how dare you? It's like, well, they know they're at the start of a rebuild. They know they've had a really great crack with what they've got in draft asset, but they know they're 2 or 3 drafts away and 2 or 3 developmental years on top of that from really having their midfield balanced Right. Just ask Crows fans, when your balance of your midfield is out of alignment, you might be strong in one area, but you're going to get beaten up in the others. And it felt like last week the Tigers just got it a little bit better in terms of the balance of their midfield. I think that might be as good as it could get. And I think that might be as big as Taranto can get, be a 105 guy that can sneak 110s every couple of weeks. But if you can do that for at this price point up until his mid-season buy, it's a great value pick. He's impacting the scoreboard. He's getting mid to high 20s. You'd want it to creep over to the early 30s if you could, but I think he's in and around that market. So to me, Tim Taranto sits in that spot. So for me, those are my top 10 trade targets for the week. Which of them are you trading into? Or is there another player you've got desperately and keenly your eyes on that you've decided to make a trade? Why don't you comment below and let me know the trade targets you're looking at this week for in AFL Fantasy. If you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, make sure you do so. Give this video a like, and we'll be back later in the week with a Supercoach episode of my trade targets, as well as our strategy session late Tuesday night. And you know what? Might even throw a DPP predictions episode out there for you as well. Let's see how we go. Hey, good luck this week. Don't forget, back to best 22. You're about to be found out if your team hasn't been building well or not. Good luck this week. I hope your trades work out well for you, and we'll be back with you on the channel real soon.